The first bison dropped to its knees before the auction even began. Nobody moved to help it. Men stood along the wooden rail with coffee cups in their hands, looking over the thin herd as if they were studying broken farm equipment. 40 animals crowded inside the holding pen, their winter coats hanging rough over narrow bodies. Dust clung to their legs. Several had patches of missing hair. One old cow breathed so heavily that every breath showed through the movement of her ribs. Most buyers had already decided the herd was worthless. Evelyn Mercer had not. She stood near the back of the auction yard with one hand resting on the shoulder of her 11-year-old son, Noah. They had come to Dry Creek, Colorado, for a used water tank. Nothing more. At least that was what Evelyn had told herself when they left their small ranch before sunrise. The Mercer place had survived 3 hard years since her husband, Daniel, died after a winter riding accident. It was only 140 acres, too small to impress anyone and too valuable for Evelyn to surrender. She kept 12 horses for nearby ranchers, repaired fences for cash, sold eggs in town, and counted every dollar twice before spending it. Buying bison was not part of any sensible plan. Especially not 40 of them. Noah tugged gently on her sleeve. "Mom, that one keeps trying to stand." Evelyn watched the fallen cow. The animal pushed against the dirt, rose halfway, then sank again. 2 men near the fence laughed. "That whole bunch is halfway to the grave already," one said. The other shook his head. "Wouldn't take them for free." Evelyn said nothing. She moved closer to the rail. The auction yard had once belonged to Silver Basin Buffalo Company, a breeding operation that had failed after years of bad management and unpaid loans. Everything was being sold that morning: trucks, feeders, gates, saddles, old tractors. The bison were last. Nobody wanted the responsibility of moving them. Nobody wanted the feed bill. Nobody wanted animals with missing records. Evelyn knew enough about livestock to understand why. A cheap animal could become the most expensive thing a rancher ever owned. Still, something about the herd bothered her. It was not pity. She had learned the difference between pity and instinct a long time ago. Pity made a person act quickly. Instinct made them look twice. And Evelyn was looking twice. The herd was weak, but it was not behaving like a broken herd. The larger cows had formed around the smaller animals. When one young animal stumbled, 2 older cows shifted beside it. The biggest bull stayed near the edge of the group, watching every person who walked past the fence. They were exhausted. But they were organized. Then Evelyn saw something else. One cow turned sideways. Under the dirty hair along its hip was a faint mark. Not a fresh ranch brand. Something older. 3 short lines curved around a small diamond. Evelyn leaned forward. Before she could study it longer, the animal moved behind another cow. A voice came from beside her. "Thinking about starting an empire, Mrs. Mercer." She knew that voice. Grant Holly's. He owned Hollow Ridge Ranch, nearly 18,000 acres stretching across the northern part of the valley. Cattle, horses, grazing leases, feed contracts, trucking interests. People in Dry Creek called him successful. People who had borrowed money from him used different words. Grant was in his late 50s, always clean-shaven, always wearing a hat that looked as if dust had been trained not to touch it. He smiled at Noah first. Then at Evelyn. "I hear you've been repairing fence for the Carson family," he said. "I hear people talk too much." Grant laughed. Still stubborn. Evelyn turned back toward the pen. Grant followed her eyes. "Don't tell me you're interested in those." I didn't tell you anything. They're finished. His tone changed. Less amused now. More certain. There's no paperwork worth trusting. Half of them are underweight. You would spend more getting them home than buying them. Evelyn glanced at him. You seem to know quite a bit about animals you don't want. For the smallest moment, his smile disappeared. Then it returned. I know bad business when I see it. The auctioneer climbed onto the platform. Last lot of the morning. Entire remaining bison herd, 40 head, buyer takes all. A few men began walking toward their trucks. The auctioneer looked around. Opening at 2,000. Silence. 1,500. Nothing. 1,000. Someone coughed. The auctioneer frowned. $800 for 40 head, 800 to start. Grant folded his arms. Should come with 40 shovels, a rancher called. Laughter moved through the yard. Evelyn barely heard it. She was watching the cow with the old mark. 3 lines. A diamond. Something about it pulled at an old memory. Years earlier, before Noah was born, Daniel had brought home a cattle magazine from Wyoming. One article had been about old plains bison lines that survived brutal winters on poor land. She could not remember the names. But she remembered the photographs. And she remembered Daniel saying something strange. Animals remember things men breed out of them. At the time, she had laughed at him. Now she wished she had listened more closely. 800, the auctioneer called again. Last chance. Noah looked up at his mother. He knew that look on her face. Mom. Evelyn lifted the bidding card. The auction yard became strangely quiet. Then someone laughed. Grant turned slowly toward her. The auctioneer blinked. 800 from Mrs. Mercer. No competing hand rose. Not one. The hammer fell. Sold. Noah stared at his mother. Evelyn stared at the pen. 40 bison now belonged to her. For several seconds, she felt nothing at all. Then every problem arrived in her mind at once. Transport. Fencing. Feed. Water. Veterinary care. Money. Especially money. Noah whispered, Did we just buy them? Apparently. All of them. Apparently. He looked at the herd, then at his mother. We still need the water tank. Despite herself, Evelyn almost laughed. Almost. Grant stepped closer. That may be the most expensive $800 you ever spend. Could be. Your pasture won't hold them. I'll fix it. You don't have enough winter feed. I'll find it. And when you don't. Evelyn finally faced him. When I don't, I'll worry about it then. Grant lowered his voice. Your husband used to know when a gamble was too big. The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. She felt her fingers tighten around the auction card. But she did not give Grant the argument he wanted. Don't use Daniel to explain me. Grant studied her for a moment. Then he looked toward the herd. By noon, Evelyn learned that she had an even bigger problem. The animals had to leave the auction property before sunset the following day. Silver Basin's land was being turned over to the bank. No extension. No delay. She drove home with Noah beside her and silence filling the truck. The Colorado sky had gone pale gray. Clouds gathered along the mountains. On the radio, A weather report warned that the first hard storm of the season could reach the valley within 48 hours. Noah kept looking toward his mother. Finally, he asked, "Are you scared?" Evelyn watched the road. "Yes." He seemed surprised. Adults were not supposed to admit things like that. "Then why did you buy them?" Evelyn took several seconds before answering. "I don't know yet." That answer stayed with her all the way home. By late afternoon, their kitchen table disappeared beneath notebooks, feed estimates, old maps, unpaid bills, and telephone numbers. Evelyn called 6 livestock haulers. 4 refused. 1 wanted more money than she had. The last number belonged to Earl Bennett, a retired rancher who had known Daniel. Earl listened quietly. Then he said 40. 40. Bison. Yes. You lose your mind. Possibly. There was a long silence. Then Earl sighed. I can make 2 runs with my old rig. You're paying fuel. I can do that. And when spring comes, you're helping me replace the south fence. Deal. Her next call was to Dr. Samuel Reed, a veterinarian who had spent much of his career working with large-range animals. Samuel arrived before dark. He walked the pasture first. Then he looked at Evelyn. This fence won't stop a frightened bison. I know. No, Evelyn, a horse tests a bad fence, a bison can erase one. I said I know. He studied her face. Then his expression softened slightly. All right, show me what you bought. They reached the auction yard just before nightfall. Samuel examined the herd from outside the pen before going in. He worked slowly. He watched their eyes, their breathing, their movement, their droppings, their feet. He spent nearly an hour saying very little. Evelyn finally asked, "How bad?" Samuel removed 1 glove. Bad enough. Her stomach tightened. But he looked toward the animals. But not the way people think. What does that mean? They're hungry. Some are badly underweight. 2 cows worry me. Maybe 3. But I'm not seeing the sickness I'd expect in a herd that was truly collapsing. He pointed toward the bull. Look at him. The animal stood thin but alert, keeping itself between Samuel and several cows. He's still guarding. Then Samuel pointed toward the oldest cow. She moves every time the younger ones move. Evelyn nodded. I noticed that. Samuel glanced at her. You notice too much. That's probably how you got into this mess. For the first time that day, Evelyn smiled. Only briefly. Samuel warned her about feeding them too heavily too fast. Their bodies had adjusted to scarcity. Rich feed in large amounts could cause serious problems. They needed gradual recovery. Minerals. Clean water. Quiet. Space. And time. Time was the one thing winter might not give them. The first truck arrived at the Mercer ranch the next morning under a darkening sky. Noah stood well back from the unloading area. Evelyn had made him promise twice. The gate swung open. For several seconds, the bison did not move. Then 1 cow stepped down. Another followed. The herd poured slowly into the pasture, enormous even in their weakened condition. They stopped 50 yards from the barn. Every head turned toward Evelyn. Noah whispered from behind the fence, "They're looking at you." No. She pulled her coat tighter. They're deciding whether this place is safe. The snow began before sunset. Not heavy at first. just white dust moving across the pasture. By midnight, the wind had risen hard enough to make the barn doors shake. Evelyn woke to Noah calling her name. She pulled on her boots and ran outside with a lantern. One of the weakest cows was down near the old windmill. Evelyn crossed the pasture carefully. The cow tried to rise. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. Samuel answered on the third telephone call. He talked Evelyn through what to do. Keep the animal protected from the wind. Do not force her. Bring water. Watch her breathing. Evelyn dragged 2 old wooden panels through the snow and made a crude barrier. Her gloves soaked through. Her hair whipped across her face. The lantern hanging from a fence post swung wildly in the wind. For nearly 2 hours, the cow barely moved. Evelyn sat several yards away. Close enough to watch. Far enough not to frighten her. The storm grew worse. For a moment, exhaustion pulled Evelyn backward into another winter. Daniel's coat hanging by the door. His boots missing from their usual place. Men from town standing in her kitchen, unable to look her in the eyes. Noah crying where he thought nobody could hear. Evelyn shut the memory away. Not tonight. She looked at the cow. You don't get to quit tonight either. The words left her before she thought about them. The animal's ear twitched. Evelyn leaned against the fence post. I made a very stupid decision because of you. Another twitch. So now you have to help me prove it wasn't stupid. Around 3 in the morning, the cow moved. First one front leg. Then the other. Evelyn stood slowly. The bison rocked forward. For one terrible second, she almost fell again. Then she rose. Unsteady. Shaking. But standing. Evelyn's breath broke into a laugh she had not expected. Behind her, light glowed from the kitchen window. Noah was watching. The old cow turned toward the pasture. As she did, the lantern light crossed her hindquarter. Evelyn froze. There it was again. The strange faded mark. 3 curved lines around a diamond. But this time, she saw something beneath it. A second shape. Small. Almost hidden. A letter. Then another. Evelyn stepped closer, careful not to frighten the animal. The mark looked less like an ordinary brand now, and more like an emblem. Something deliberate. Something old. The next morning, Samuel returned. Evelyn showed him the mark. At first, he said nothing. Then he pushed the thick hair aside with 2 gloved fingers. His face changed. Where did you say Silver Bison got these animals? I don't know. Did they give you breeding records? Nothing useful. Samuel examined the brand again. Then he looked at the rest of the herd. Suddenly, he seemed far more interested than he had the day before. Find every animal carrying this mark. Why? Samuel stood slowly. Because I saw something like it once. Evelyn waited. He looked toward the herd. 30 years ago. A cold feeling passed through her that had nothing to do with the storm. What does it mean? Samuel shook his head. I need to be sure before I tell you. Then he pointed toward another cow moving through the snow. That animal carried the same faint mark. And another behind it did too. Evelyn counted 3. Then 5. Then 7. By the time she reached 12, Samuel was no longer pretending this was ordinary. Evelyn looked across the pasture at the 40 animals everyone in Dry Creek had called worthless. For the first time since raising her auction card, she wondered whether she had bought something very different from what the town believed. And somewhere across the valley, Grant Hollies was about to hear that those old marks had been noticed. By noon, Grant Hollies knew. Evelyn did not know who told him. Dry Creek had a way of carrying news from one fence line to another faster than a horse could travel, and anything connected to Grant seemed to reach him before it reached anyone else. What she did know was that the feed order she had arranged 3 days earlier suddenly disappeared. The supplier called while she was carrying buckets toward the north pasture. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mercer," the man said. "I can't fill your order." Evelyn stopped walking. "You confirmed it yesterday." "I know. You took my deposit." "I'll return it." She looked toward the pasture. Snow still covered the ground in uneven patches. 40 dark shapes moved slowly beyond the fence. "What changed?" There was silence on the line. Then the supplier cleared his throat. "Hollow Ridge bought most of what I've got." "Most?" "Everything worth hauling." Evelyn closed her eyes. Grant had not threatened her directly. He had done something cleaner than that. He had simply reached into the market and removed what she needed. How much did he buy? Enough. The answer told her everything. She thanked the man and hung up. For several seconds, she stood alone in the cold with the empty buckets in her hands. Then Noah came out of the barn. "What happened?" "Nothing we can't solve." He studied her face. That was another thing she had learned after Daniel died. Children knew when adults lied, even when the lie was meant to protect them. Noah looked toward the pasture. "Is it the food?" Evelyn did not answer immediately. Finally, she nodded. "A little." Noah glanced at the bison. "Can they eat what's under the snow?" "Some of it." "Then maybe we help them find it." Evelyn almost told him it was not that simple. Then she remembered the animals pawing at the buried grass the day before. Maybe it was not simple. But maybe it was possible. Over the next week, Evelyn stopped trying to manage the herd like cattle. That decision changed everything. Samuel explained that bison could use winter ground differently. They could dig through snow with their heads. They tolerated coarse forage better. They did not need to gather around feed in the same way cattle often did. "If they have the instincts," Samuel said. "And if they don't, then this gets harder." Evelyn divided the ranch into sections using temporary fencing, opening one piece of pasture at a time. It was not elegant. It barely looked professional. Old posts leaned at strange angles. Some of the wire came from scrap piles. One gate had a hinge Noah helped repair with a piece of chain. But it worked. The herd moved. Slowly. Carefully. And when the snow deepened again, Evelyn watched 3 older cows push their heads through the crust and sweep the snow aside in wide arcs. The younger animals followed. Samuel saw it the next morning. He stood near the fence with his hands in his coat pockets. "That's not common." Evelyn looked at him. "What isn't?" "The way they're opening the ground for the herd." One old cow cleared a patch. Another stepped forward and widened it. The smaller animals came behind them. Samuel's eyes narrowed. "They've done this before." "All bison do that, don't they?" "Some do." He shook his head. "Not like this." Evelyn looked toward the animals with the faded marks. 12 have the symbol. Samuel corrected her. 14. She turned. "You found 2 more." "Yesterday." The number kept growing. and with each mark, Samuel seemed more troubled. Evelyn finally asked him, "Are you going to tell me what you think it is?" He hesitated. "I think it may be connected to an old breeding herd." "What kind?" "A strong one." "That doesn't explain your face." Samuel let out a slow breath. "Years ago, there was a line called the Diamond 3 herd." Evelyn looked toward the brand. 3 curved lines. A small diamond. Her heart beat harder. Samuel continued. "They were raised farther north, Montana mostly. They became known for surviving poor winter grass, long freezes, and dry summers. Ranchers wanted them because they didn't fall apart the first time the weather turned ugly." "What happened to them?" "The program broke apart." "Why?" "Money, ownership fights, bad decisions." He gave a tired shrug. "Same things that ruin most good operations." "And these could be from that herd." "Could be." "How valuable?" Samuel looked directly at her. "If they're really Diamond 3. He paused. "Valuable enough that somebody would have wanted them before the auction." Evelyn thought of Grant standing beside the pen. Too informed. Too interested. Too certain they were worthless. A cold suspicion settled inside her. Grant knew. Samuel did not answer. He did not need to. That evening, Evelyn went through every paper she had received from the auction. There was almost nothing useful. A sale receipt. A transportation release. A health inspection that was already months old. No breeding history. No proper lineage records. No original purchase documents. Nothing that explained where Silver Bison had obtained the animals. Noah sat across the kitchen table, doing arithmetic. Every few minutes he glanced at her. "Find anything?" "No." He erased something from his notebook. Then he asked, "What if Mr. Hollies knew they were special?" Evelyn looked up. "Why would you think that?" "Because he wanted you not to buy them." Children sometimes saw a straight road where adults invented 10 turns. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "Maybe." Noah looked down again. "Then he wasn't laughing because you were wrong." His pencil stopped. "He was laughing because he thought you didn't know." That sentence stayed with her. 2 days later, Grant arrived at the Mercer ranch. He came alone. No truck convoy. No manager. No dramatic show. Just Grant in a dark coat, standing outside the barn while snowmelt dripped from the roof. Evelyn approached him slowly. "What do you want?" Grant looked past her toward the pasture. "They look better." Disappointed. Surprised. He smiled. "There's a difference." Evelyn waited. Grant reached inside his coat and removed a folded piece of paper. "I came to make this easier." She did not take it. "What is it?" "An offer." "For what?" "Everything." Evelyn looked at him. "The bison." "The herd in your ranch." Her expression hardened. Grant unfolded the paper himself. $120,000. Evelyn laughed once. There was no humor in it. "My ranch is worth more than that without the herd." "Your ranch is worth what someone can actually pay. And you're the only one who can pay. In this valley." He looked around. "One of the few." Evelyn stepped closer. "Why do you want the animals?" "I don't." "Then leave them out of the offer." Grant's eyes changed. Only slightly. You're becoming suspicious. I'm becoming curious. Curiosity can be expensive. So can buying every bale of good hay within 40 miles. The smile left his face. For the first time, Evelyn knew she had struck something real. Grant folded the offer. You think I did that because of you? I think you wanted me hungry. I run a large operation. I buy feed in volume. 2 days after the auction, Grant looked toward the herd, then back at her. Evelyn, you are raising a boy alone. Your loan comes up for review in April. Your fences are poor. Your equipment is worn. You don't have the capital to carry 40 bison through a bad year. He held the paper toward her again. This gives you a way out. Evelyn stared at it. $120,000. Enough to clear most of what she owed. Enough to replace the leaking roof. Enough to stop calculating grocery money against diesel. Enough to make Noah's life easier. For one dangerous second, she pictured taking it. Then she remembered Grant beside the auction pen. Too calm. Too certain. She looked him in the eye. Not interested. His jaw tightened. You haven't even read the terms. I heard enough. Evelyn. No. Grant tucked the paper away. Then he lowered his voice. You are mistaking stubbornness for strength. And you're mistaking money for ownership. They stood facing each other. A horse shifted inside the barn. The sound of hooves against wood filled the silence. Grant finally turned toward his truck. Before leaving, he stopped. Ask Samuel Reed what happened to the original Diamond 3 herd. Evelyn's breath caught. Grant did not turn around. Then ask yourself why you think 14 branded animals happened to end up in a bankrupt auction yard by accident. He climbed into his truck and drove away. Evelyn stood in the yard long after the dust settled. Grant had just confirmed the one thing he had been pretending not to know. He recognized the brand. That night, Evelyn called Samuel. He came over after supper. Noah went upstairs, but Evelyn knew he was probably listening through the floorboards. Samuel sat at the kitchen table while Evelyn repeated Grant's words. When she finished, Samuel rubbed both hands over his face. He knew. Yes. Samuel stared toward the dark window. Then he said, the Diamond 3 program didn't simply dissolve. Evelyn waited. What happened? Part of the herd vanished into private sales. Vanished. Records changed hands. Some animals were moved under different company names. Nobody ever proved anything criminal. But a lot of people with money knew exactly where certain animals went. Evelyn leaned forward. Was Grant one of them? I don't know. You sound like you do. Samuel's eyes met hers. I know Hollow Ridge tried to build a premium bison program about 12 years ago. Using Diamond 3. They tried. What happened? They couldn't get enough breeding stock. Evelyn sat very still. Now the pieces were beginning to fit. Grant had not mocked the herd because he believed it was worthless. He had mocked it because he expected everyone else to believe that. And maybe he had expected to buy it later. Quietly. Cheaply. Without competition. Instead, Evelyn Mercer had walked into an auction looking for a water tank and raised her bidding card. If this story has already made you wonder how many valuable things get discarded simply because nobody looks closely enough, stay with Evelyn because the hardest part of her fight was still ahead. The next morning brought another problem. A county truck stopped outside her gate. 2 inspectors stepped out. They were polite. That worried Evelyn more than anger would have. "We received a livestock safety complaint," one explained. "From who?" "We don't disclose that." Evelyn almost smiled. She did not need them to. They inspected the fencing, water access, shelter, distance from the county road. Their questions were reasonable. The timing was not. By late afternoon, Evelyn received a written order. 30 days to strengthen the northern fence. The required materials would cost nearly $6,000. Money she did not have. Samuel read the notice twice. "This is technically fair. That's what makes it useful." He nodded. Grant was learning. He did not need to break rules to hurt her. He only needed to make sure every rule reached Evelyn at the worst possible moment. Earl heard about the fence order and showed up the following Saturday with a post driver. Then came the Carson brothers. Then a woman named June Harper from a nearby horse ranch. Then 2 men who had laughed at the auction. None apologized. They simply brought tools. Evelyn did not ask why. Sometimes shame arrived disguised as help. For 3 days they worked. Noah carried water. Earl set posts. Samuel checked the herd between fence sections. June brought stew in a battered pot. By sunset on the 3rd day, nearly half the required line was standing. Evelyn stepped back and looked at it. Strong steel posts. New wire. Fresh braces. Her throat tightened. She had spent years believing that accepting help meant admitting weakness. Daniel had been the one who asked neighbors when they needed something. After his death, Evelyn stopped. She thought surviving alone was the same as being strong. Now, watching people work under the orange winter sky, she realized maybe she had confused loneliness with independence. She turned away before anyone saw her wipe her eyes. That same evening, Samuel found another branded cow. Then another. 16. 2 days later, Evelyn drove to the county archive in Coyote Springs. The clerk there, a sharp-eyed woman named Ruth Dalton, spent nearly 3 hours digging through records tied to Silver Bison. Most led nowhere. Then Ruth found an old livestock transfer sheet folded inside a tax file. The paper was faded. Across the top was the name of a company Evelyn had never heard of. Prairie Dominion Conservation Stock. Below it was a description. 23 cows. 4 bulls. Diamond 3 foundation line. Transferred to Silver Basin. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she read it. 27 animals. Not 14. Not 16. Possibly 27. Then she saw the date. 11 years earlier. At the bottom of the paper was another name. Not an owner. Not a buyer. A witness. Grant Hollies. Evelyn felt the room go quiet around her. Ruth noticed her expression. "You know him?" "Yes." Ruth leaned closer to the page. "Then I'd say Mr. Hollies knew exactly what was standing in that auction pen." Evelyn stared at the signature. She had thought Grant discovered the truth after she bought the herd. She had been wrong. He had known before the hammer ever fell. And if 27 Diamond 3 animals had once entered Silver Basin, Evelyn needed to know how many of them were now standing on her land. Because the answer might explain why Grant Hollies was suddenly willing to spend 6 figures just to make her disappear. Evelyn drove home from Coyote Springs with Grant Hollis's name burning in her mind. The old transfer sheet lay, folded inside her coat pocket. 27 Diamond 3 animals had once been delivered to Silver Bison. Grant had witnessed the transfer himself. That meant his surprise at the auction had been an act. His jokes had been an act. Even his warning that the herd was worthless had been an act. What Evelyn still did not know was why. She reached the ranch near sunset. Noah was waiting on the porch. He had grown used to reading his mother's face before asking questions. "You found something." Evelyn climbed the steps. "Maybe. Good maybe or bad maybe." She looked toward the pasture. "Both." Inside, she spread the transfer record across the kitchen table. Samuel arrived less than an hour later. He read the page once. Then again. When he reached Grant's signature, his mouth tightened. That settles one question. He knew. Yes. How much did he know? Samuel tapped the document. At least enough to recognize the line. Evelyn stared at the date. If 27 entered Silver Basin, where are the rest? Samuel shook his head. Some may have died, some could have been sold, some may still be in your herd without visible brands. Can we prove that? Not by looking. Then how? Genetic testing. Evelyn already disliked the answer. How much? Samuel hesitated. Depends how many animals you test. Enough to prove the herd. Several $1,000s at minimum. She almost laughed. The sound came out flat. I don't have several $1,000s. Samuel folded his arms. Then we find another way. But there was no easy way. Over the next several days, Evelyn contacted laboratories, universities, breeding associations, and conservation groups. Most were interested. Interest, however, was free. Testing was not. One laboratory in Nebraska offered the best option. Hair samples from every adult animal, blood samples from selected cows, and comparison against archived Diamond 3 genetic records. The final estimate was more than $9,000. Evelyn read the number 3 times. $9,000 might as well have been $90,000. Her checking account was nearly empty. The new fence had taken what little emergency money remained. Winter feed had cost more than she planned. The ranch loan was still waiting for spring review. And Noah needed new boots badly enough that cardboard had been slipped under one worn sole to keep water out. That night, Evelyn stood in the barn looking at Daniel's old saddle. It was a beautiful working saddle, not decorated for show, but made by a respected Wyoming craftsman. Daniel had saved for years to buy it. After he died, Evelyn never let anyone else use it. She still remembered the shape his hand had worn into the horn. Noah found her standing beside it. You're thinking about selling Dad's saddle. Evelyn turned. I didn't hear you. You do that when you're worried. Do what? Touch the little cut in the leather. Evelyn looked down. Her thumb was resting against a narrow scar near the pommel. Daniel had made it years ago when a frightened horse smashed the saddle into a gate. He had refused to repair the mark. Said equipment should be allowed to remember things. Evelyn took her hand away. I may have to sell it. Noah was quiet. She expected him to object. Instead, he walked closer. Would Dad care? Yes. Noah thought about it. Would he care more about the saddle than the ranch? Evelyn looked at her son. Sometimes his questions sounded too much like Daniel. No. Then sell it. His voice wavered on the final word. He cared more than he wanted her to know. Evelyn pulled him into her arms. The next morning, she listed the saddle. It sold within 2 days. She sold an old hay rake after that. Then a spare horse trailer that had not moved in years. The money hurt to collect because every item belonged to the life she had built with Daniel. But slowly, the testing fund grew. Samuel collected samples, while Evelyn recorded ear tags and identifying marks. 28 adults showed either visible brands, body traits, or behavioral signs worth investigating. They tested all 40. Then they waited. And while they waited, the snow stopped coming. By the middle of March, the mountains looked wrong. Too much dark rock. Too little white. April brought wind instead of rain. May brought heat. The winter that had nearly frozen the herd was replaced by a spring that seemed determined to dry the ranch into powder. Grass stopped growing. Creek levels fell. Nearby ranchers began talking about selling cattle months earlier than planned. Evelyn walked the pastures every morning before breakfast. She carried a notebook and marked every patch where green growth remained. The Diamond 3 cows surprised her. They did not remain near the feeding area. They spread across the ranch. They ate coarse grasses the horses ignored. They stripped leaves from hardy shrubs. They dug into low ground where moisture remained beneath the dry surface. Evelyn adjusted her rotation again. Shorter grazing periods. Longer rest periods. More careful movement. Samuel watched the system develop. You know, this isn't how most people around here run animals. Most people around here don't own 40 bison they bought by accident. He smiled. Fair point. Then the ranch well began coughing air. Evelyn heard the pump strain before sunrise one morning. By noon, the flow had dropped almost in half. She called a well contractor. He examined the system and delivered the news she feared. The pump isn't your real problem. What is? Water level dropped. Can you deepen it? I can. Cost? He gave her the figure. Evelyn closed her eyes. Of course. Every problem now came with 4 numbers attached. She could not afford a deeper well. Not while waiting for the genetic results. So she started hauling water. Earl loaned her a tank trailer. June let her fill from a deeper well on her property. Every evening Evelyn drove 6 miles, filled the tank, returned, emptied it into storage, and started over. Noah kept count in his notebook. Gallons. Temperature. Rainfall. Water trough levels. He had turned worry into numbers because numbers felt manageable. One night, Evelyn found him asleep at the table with his pencil still in his hand. She lifted the notebook carefully. At the bottom of the page, beneath a column of water totals, he had written, "We still have enough for tomorrow." Evelyn stared at the sentence. Not next month. Not next week. Tomorrow. Some days, that was all survival meant. Then the first pregnant cow separated herself from the herd. Samuel had warned Evelyn to watch for it. She noticed the cow pacing near the cottonwoods at dusk. Her belly hung low. Her tail lifted repeatedly. Evelyn called Samuel. How long? Could be hours. You're coming. I'm 40 minutes away. The cow went into active labor 20 minutes later. By then, the sun had disappeared, and a dry wind had begun moving through the pasture. Evelyn stayed beyond the fence, watching through binoculars. Bison births usually needed no help. That did not stop her heart from pounding. The cow lay down, stood again, turned, lay down once more. Noah watched from the porch with strict instructions not to enter the pasture. Then Evelyn saw two small hooves. Correct position. She breathed again. The birth happened quickly after that. A small calf slid onto the grass. For a few seconds it did not move. Evelyn gripped the fence. "Come on." The mother turned immediately and began cleaning it. Still nothing. Evelyn's hand tightened around the rail. Then the calf's head moved. Once. Again. It lifted its chin. Noah shouted from the porch, "It's alive." Evelyn laughed. The sound escaped before she could stop it. Within 20 minutes, the calf tried to stand. Its legs folded beneath it. It tried again. Failed. Again. Then finally stood, wobbling beneath a reddish-brown coat that caught the lantern light. Samuel arrived just in time to see it nursing. "Strong calf." Evelyn nodded. "What do we call it?" Noah shouted from behind them. "Rusty." Evelyn groaned. Samuel laughed. "Could be worse." Rusty became the first. 5 days later came the second. Then 2 calves in one morning. Then another before sunrise. By early June, 11 calves had been born. All alive. The drought worsened. Yet the calves kept coming. 14. 15. 16. Samuel became more amazed with each successful birth. These cows went through starvation, relocation, winter recovery, and now drought. And their calf survival shouldn't look this good. Evelyn looked across the pasture. Maybe they didn't read the statistics. Samuel smiled. Then his expression grew serious. Or maybe the genetics are exactly what we think. The 17th calf arrived during the hottest week of June. The 18th came 2 nights later. 18 calves. 18 alive. The number spread through Dry Creek. People who had laughed at the auction began driving slowly past the Mercer ranch. A few stopped. Some asked questions. One rancher who had called the herd walking hides stood beside the fence for nearly 20 minutes without saying a word. Then he finally asked Evelyn, "You planning to sell any calves?" "Not yet." "What would one cost?" "I don't know." "If you decide, call me." He handed her a card. By the end of the week, Evelyn had 7 names written in her notebook. People wanted calves before anyone even knew what the genetics would prove. Grant noticed too. This time he did not come himself. His ranch manager, Thomas Vane, arrived in a polished truck. He stepped out carrying a leather folder. Evelyn met him at the gate. "Grant busy?" Thomas ignored the question. "Hollow Ridge would like to purchase your spring calf crop. They're not for sale. We're prepared to pay above market. They're still nursing. We'd contract them now and take delivery after weaning." Evelyn folded her arms. "Why?" "Mr. Holly sees potential." Evelyn nearly smiled. A few months ago, he saw 40 animals that should have been buried before Christmas. Business conditions change. Bloodlines don't. Thomas's eyes sharpened. So did Evelyn's. She had said it deliberately. For the first time, She saw uncertainty cross his face. He opened the folder. We can offer $40,000 for the 18 calves. The amount struck Evelyn harder than she wanted to admit. $40,000. The well. The loan. Feed. Noah's future. All of it became easier with one signature. Thomas must have seen the hesitation. The offer expires Friday. Evelyn looked toward the pasture. Rusty ran after his mother, awkward and fast, kicking once at nothing. She imagined loading him onto a truck. Then the others. Selling them before she knew what they were. Before she knew what they could become. No. Thomas closed the folder. You should think carefully. I did. Holly's ranch won't make this offer twice. Good. Thomas stepped closer. His voice lowered. If the genetic testing doesn't support your claims, people will lose interest quickly. I haven't made any public claims. People are already talking. They usually are. Thomas studied her. Then he said, registration problems have ruined more valuable herds than drought ever did. Evelyn understood the warning. If Grant could not buy the calves, he intended to make others afraid of them. Thomas drove away. 3 days later, rumors appeared. That Evelyn's herd was mixed heavily with cattle genetics. That the animals carried unreliable records. That the Diamond 3 story was something she invented to raise prices. That she was using her status as a widowed mother to win sympathy. Evelyn wanted to fight every lie. Samuel stopped her. Not yet. People believe him. Some do. He gets to say anything he wants. And you'll answer with evidence. When? Samuel looked toward the telephone on the wall. When the laboratory calls. The call came the following Tuesday. Samuel answered it. He said almost nothing for nearly 5 minutes. Evelyn stood across the kitchen watching his face. Noah sat frozen at the table. Finally, Samuel hung up. For several seconds, he did not speak. Evelyn could barely breathe. Well, Samuel looked at her. I was wrong. Her stomach dropped. Wrong about what? About 27. He placed one hand on the table. 32 of your adult animals carry verified Diamond 3 lineage. Evelyn stared at him. Samuel continued. 24 are direct descendants of the original Foundation group. Noah's eyes widened. And the calves? Samuel looked almost stunned. 17 of the 18 carry the strongest markers the lab was looking for. Evelyn sat down slowly. 17. He nodded. The herd isn't just connected to Diamond 3. Samuel slid the report toward her. As far as the archived records show, Evelyn, you may have the largest intact breeding group left. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, a horse shifted beside the barn. The old clock above the stove ticked. Noah whispered, so they're really special. Samuel smiled at him. Very. Evelyn should have felt relief. Instead, a new fear entered almost immediately. If this is worth what you think it's worth, Grant won't stop. Samuel's smile disappeared. No. The telephone rang again. Evelyn picked it up. It was Ruth Dalton from the county archive. Her voice sounded tense. Evelyn, I found something else. What? An old agreement tied to the Diamond 3 transfer. Evelyn looked at Samuel. What kind of agreement? A purchase right clause. Her hand tightened around the receiver. Whose name? Ruth hesitated. Hollow Ridge Ranch. Evelyn felt the room turn cold despite the summer heat. Ruth continued. If this document is valid, Grant Hollies may claim he had the legal right to buy those animals before anyone else. Evelyn looked through the kitchen window toward the herd. 32 confirmed Diamond 3 bison. 18 healthy calves. Everything she had fought to save. Everything Daniel's saddle had helped pay to prove. Everything Noah had counted water for through the drought. And now Grant might not need to buy any of it from her. He might try to take the whole herd with a piece of paper written years before she ever raised her hand at that auction. Evelyn did not sleep that night. The old purchase right agreement remained on the kitchen table beneath the yellow light of the lamp. One piece of paper. That was all it might take. Months of cold nights, broken fencing, hauled water, sold possessions, 18 calves and 40 animals she had refused to abandon could disappear because of words written years before she ever knew the Diamond 3 herd existed. Noah had finally gone upstairs after midnight. Before leaving, he stopped at the kitchen doorway. Can he really take them? Evelyn wanted to tell him no. She wanted to give him the kind of answer a mother was supposed to give when her child was afraid. Instead, she said, I don't know yet. Noah nodded. Then he looked through the dark window toward the pasture. We didn't steal them. No. You paid for them. Yes. Then somebody should care about that. Evelyn looked at him. So do I. The next morning, she drove to Coyote Springs before the sun fully cleared the mountains. Ruth Dalton was already waiting at the archive office. 3 boxes sat on the table. I pulled everything connected to Prairie Dominion, Silver Basin, and Hollow Ridge, Ruth said. Everything. Everything I could find without breaking into the courthouse basement. For 6 hours, the 2 women read. Contracts. Tax records. Livestock transfers. Old letters. Bankruptcy notices. Most meant nothing. Then Ruth stopped. Here. She slid a document toward Evelyn. It was the original Diamond 3 transfer agreement. The clause Grant relied on was there. Hollow Ridge Ranch had been given first opportunity to purchase certain animals if Prairie Dominion chose to sell them privately within 5 years. Evelyn read it again. 5 years. Ruth nodded. Silver Basin's auction happened more than 10 years after this was signed. Then it's expired. That's one problem. 1. Ruth turned to another page. The clause also covered a voluntary sale by Prairie Dominion. But Prairie Dominion wasn't the seller at the auction. No. Silver Basin was. Correct. Ruth leaned back. And Silver Basin wasn't even operating normally when you bought them. The herd was sold through a liquidation auction after creditors took control. Evelyn felt something in her chest loosen. So Grant's agreement doesn't apply. Not the way I'm reading it. Are you sure? I'm a records clerk, not a lawyer. Ruth tapped the papers. But I'm sure enough that I wouldn't hand anyone 40 bison, because Grant Hollies waved that document around. Evelyn almost smiled. Then Ruth held up another envelope. And this is more interesting. Inside was a copy of an old letter sent from Hollow Ridge to Silver Basin 3 weeks before the auction. It was signed by Thomas Vane. Evelyn read the first paragraph. Hollow Ridge was interested in acquiring the remaining bison herd after liquidation, but only if the animals were offered at a reduced private price. Another note mentioned concerns that unnecessary buyer interest could raise the final cost. Evelyn's eyes stopped there. He planned to buy them. Ruth nodded. Looks that way. And he wanted nobody else interested. Looks that way too. Evelyn thought back to the auction yard. Grant laughing. Grant announcing the herd was finished. Grant telling everyone she would be burying them before Christmas. He had not been giving an opinion. He had been lowering a price. Evelyn folded the letter carefully. For months, she had wondered whether Grant's cruelty was personal. Now she understood. It had never been about her. Not at first. She had simply stepped into a deal he believed belonged to him. The insult came afterward, when she refused to step back out. 2 days later, Grant made his move publicly. The Dry Creek Gazette printed a story questioning ownership of the Diamond 3 herd. By afternoon, people were repeating the headline as if a judge had already ruled. Grant gave an interview outside Hollow Ridge. He never accused Evelyn of stealing. He was too careful for that. He said only that historical ownership obligations should be respected. Then he questioned whether an inexperienced operator should be making valuable breeding decisions with what could be an important genetic resource. That sentence angered Evelyn more than anything else. Inexperienced. She thought of hauling water after midnight. She thought of sleeping in the barn during calving. She thought of rebuilding fence in frozen ground. She thought of learning every animal's movement, temperament, appetite, and habits. Grant had known the name of the bloodline. Evelyn had learned the herd itself. Samuel wanted her to hire a lawyer immediately. Ruth agreed. Evelyn did. But she did something else too. She stopped hiding behind the gate. She invited everyone to the Mercer ranch. Ranchers, county officials, the newspaper, veterinarians, people who supported her, people who doubted her, even Grant. If they're going to talk about this herd, Evelyn told Samuel, they can do it while looking at the animals. Samuel smiled. Daniel would have liked that. The words caught her off guard. She looked away. Daniel would have told me not to buy 40 bison. Samuel laughed. No, Daniel would have complained for 3 days, then helped you build the fence. She laughed too. It was the first time she had laughed while speaking about her husband without feeling guilty afterward. The public inspection took place on a bright August morning. More than 80 people came. Trucks lined both sides of the county road. Noah stood near the barn in a clean shirt, clutching his weather notebook. Evelyn had told him he did not need to help. He had ignored her. Samuel presented the veterinary records first. Weight recovery, calving numbers, disease screening, mortality. Only one elderly animal had been lost during the first year. Every spring calf had survived. Then came Dr. Lydia Shaw from the Western Prairie Conservation Association, a specialist Samuel had contacted after receiving the genetic results. Lydia had spent 2 days examining the herd and Evelyn's records. When she stepped before the gathering, the crowd grew quiet. This herd is significant, she said. Grant stood near the back. His face revealed nothing. Lydia continued. 32 adult animals have confirmed Diamond 3 ancestry. 24 show direct foundation line descent. Murmurs spread through the crowd. 17 of this year's 18 Calves carry the strongest genetic markers associated with that line. One rancher removed his hat. Another stepped closer. Lydia pointed toward the pasture. But genetics are only part of the story. She explained that Evelyn's grazing records showed unusually strong land recovery despite the drought. The herd had used plants cattle often ignored. Their water needs had remained manageable. Their maternal behavior had been exceptional. Their calves had remained healthy during a year when many ranches across the valley were struggling. Then Lydia said the words Evelyn had never expected to hear. Mrs. Mercer's management helped preserve what these animals already knew how to do. Evelyn looked down. For months, everyone had spoken as if she were trying to prove she had purchased valuable animals. Lydia had just said something different. Evelyn herself had become part of their value. Grant finally stepped forward. Nobody disputes that she worked hard. His voice was calm. But effort does not erase contracts. Ruth had been waiting for that. She walked beside Lydia carrying copies of the records. The contract you're referring to expired years before the liquidation. Grant's expression hardened. Ruth continued. It applied only to a voluntary private sale by Prairie Dominion. These animals were later transferred legally to Silver Bison and eventually sold through creditor liquidation. She held up another page. Mrs. Mercer's auction purchase is valid. The crowd shifted. Grant glanced toward Thomas. Thomas looked away. Then a reporter asked the question Evelyn had been waiting for. If Hollow Ridge believed it already had purchase rights, why did it send Silver Basin a private acquisition proposal before the auction? Grant's eyes moved toward Ruth's papers. The reporter continued. And why does that proposal mention avoiding additional buyer interest? For the first time Evelyn had ever seen, Grant Hollies had no immediate answer. Thomas spoke before Grant could stop him. It was a business strategy. Every face turned toward him. Grant's voice became sharp. Thomas. But Thomas had spent months standing behind another man's decisions. Apparently, he had reached his limit. We believed the herd could be acquired cheaply. The silence that followed felt enormous. Someone near the fence whispered, he knew. Thomas continued. We weren't certain how much of the Diamond 3 line remained, but yes, we knew there was a possibility. Grant stepped toward him. That's enough. It was already too late. Everyone understood. Grant had mocked Evelyn because he wanted the room empty. He had called the herd worthless while planning to buy it himself. Evelyn could have humiliated him. For 1 second she wanted to. She remembered every threat. Every canceled hay order. Every rumor. Every night she had wondered whether Noah would lose his home because she refused to surrender. Then she looked at her son. Justice did not need shouting. The truth was standing in the pasture. So Evelyn said only, you should have bid. A few people laughed. Grant did not. He left before the inspection ended. Lydia later announced that the Western Prairie Conservation Association was prepared to enter a 5-year partnership with the Mercer Ranch. The agreement would help fund a deeper well, improve breeding records, and support preservation of the Diamond 3 line. It would not make Evelyn rich. That mattered to her. She did not want another miracle she could lose. She wanted stability. Before the crowd left, 3 ranchers asked about buying calves. Then 5 more. By the following morning, 12 trucks were waiting outside her gate. Within a week, Calls came from Wyoming, Montana, Nebraska, and South Dakota. People wanted future calves. They wanted breeding agreements. They wanted advice about pasture rotation. Men who once joked that Evelyn had paid $800 for 40 problems now stood beside her barn asking when applications would open. One of them was the rancher who had said he would not take the herd for free. He removed his hat when he approached Evelyn. "I was wrong." She looked at him. "Yes, you were." He almost smiled. "Think I could reserve a heifer calf?" "Maybe." "What does maybe mean?" "It means you fill out the same form as everyone else." He laughed. "Fair enough. If you believe Evelyn was right to protect the herd instead of selling everything the moment the money appeared, tell me what you would have done in her place, because sometimes the hardest victory is knowing what not to sell." Grant eventually submitted an application too. Not personally. Thomas delivered it. Hollow Ridge wanted 4 calves. Evelyn read the form. Noah watched her. "Are you going to say no?" She thought about it. "No." Noah looked surprised. "Why?" "Because then this would still be about Grant." She placed the application with the others. If his ranch meets the standards, he waits his turn. That autumn, Evelyn sold only 6 calves. She could have sold all 18. She refused. Some would remain with their mothers. Some would strengthen the breeding herd. Some would eventually go to conservation programs. The 6 sales, combined with the conservation agreement, were enough. Enough to deepen the well. Enough to finish the fencing. Enough to bring the ranch loan current. Enough to buy Noah new boots without checking the bank balance first. One afternoon, the auctioneer from Silver Basin appeared at her gate. Evelyn recognized him immediately. He looked embarrassed. "I've got a client looking for a diamond 3-bull calf." Evelyn handed him a form. He stared at it. "You remember me?" "Yes." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I said some things that day." "You did." He waited for her to punish him with the memory. She did not. Applications are reviewed in order. He looked at the paper, then laughed softly. "I suppose that's fair." A year after the auction, the old Mercer Ranch sign came down. Noah helped paint the new one. Diamond 3 Prairie Ranch. The letters were uneven. Evelyn refused to fix them. The ranch was still modest. The house still needed paint. The barn door still complained in strong wind. But the well ran deep. The fences stood straight. Native grass had returned thick across sections of pasture that once looked exhausted. And Evelyn no longer woke every morning wondering how many days remained before everything collapsed. One evening, she and Noah stood outside the north fence. Rusty, no longer small, ran across the field with several younger calves. Hope, the old cow who had fallen during the first storm, moved slowly at the front of the herd. Her body was fuller now. Her coat shone dark in the evening light. Noah opened his weather notebook. 71 degrees. Evelyn smiled. "Any rain coming?" "Maybe Thursday." "Maybe." That's what the radio said. Very scientific. He grinned. They watched the herd climb toward the ridge. After a while, Noah asked, "Do you miss Dad's saddle?" Evelyn did not answer immediately. "Sometimes." "Do you wish you didn't sell it?" She looked across the pasture. "No." That surprised him. Evelyn rested her arms against the fence. Your father loved that saddle because he used it to build this life. Keeping it while losing everything else wouldn't have honored him. Noah considered that. Then he nodded. Inside the barn, mounted above Evelyn's desk, hung the small auction card she had used that morning. Number 63. $800. 40 starving bison. A choice almost everyone thought proved she had lost her judgment. Evelyn no longer saw it that way. She knew now that courage rarely felt like courage while a person was living through it. Sometimes it felt like cold hands repairing a fence. Sometimes it felt like selling something precious. Sometimes it felt like saying no to enough money to solve every immediate problem. Sometimes it was simply waking up afraid and doing the next necessary thing anyway. Far across the pasture, Hope reached the ridge. The herd followed her. The calves disappeared into the tall golden grass, one by one. Noah closed his notebook. Evelyn remained by the fence a little longer. 1 year earlier, the valley had laughed when a widowed mother bought 40 animals nobody wanted. Now ranchers were waiting months for the chance to raise their descendants. But that was not the part Evelyn treasured most. The greatest thing those bison had given her was not money. It was not reputation. It was not even the ranch. They had given her back the belief that losing Daniel had not ended her story. She could still build something. She could still protect something. She could still choose a future instead of merely surviving the past. The wind moved through the prairie grass. Hope led the herd down the far side of the ridge. And Evelyn Mercer watched them go, knowing that for the first time in years, she was no longer afraid of what might be waiting beyond it.